This person that I see in this photo, don't tell me this is her. This is the story of how I stumbled across this photo when I was at work, and how things proceeded from then onward. The photo was of one of my husband and his lover. I realized that I had been deceived for a long time, and I asked my husband for a divorce. The story goes on with how he scoffed and made fun of me.
What do you think you're going to do if you divorce me? You really believe you can live on your own?
I'm no longer the woman you believed I was. You betrayed me, and what's worse, you acted like it was never a betrayal, and never apologized for the cruelty you did to me. I'm going to get back at you. I'm going to destroy everything you ever held dear to your heart. Let the revenge begin. My name is Layla, and I'm 58 years old. This year will mark the 35th anniversary of me marrying my husband, Aaron. My husband is quite frankly the very definition of overbearing, and his mentality was, and I quote that,
"Men leave the house to work and provide for the family. Women are meant to support their husbands wholeheartedly and should live modestly."
He had a very odd-fashioned way of thinking. He was also had specifically used lines that he used exclusively whenever he was talking to me, two of which were,
"Dinner, a bath, a drink."
And,
"Come on, hurry the hell up."
in all the 35 years I've been married to him, I'd never once fought back or stood up for myself. I've never had to answer anything more than, "Yes, sir." And all I ever did was what my husband wanted me to do. And as it should seem, by this point, Aaron never did any housework. Or rather, he couldn't do any. He was just so useless in that domain. Clayton, our only son, hated his father. My son is such an angel, and he often kindly helped me with the housework whenever he could spare some time. But if he tried to wash the dishes for me...
"Clayton, son, don't waste your time with something that's meant for a woman to do. A man doing household chores is disgraceful."
His own father actually yelled at him for trying to help me, especially when he's been drinking. He's not violent, nor was he ever, but his already perpetually agitated mood becomes worse as he complains about everything he could find.
"Hey, there aren't enough appetizers for the drink. You really are such a useless little wimp, aren't you?"
I met my husband through the arrangements of my parents. After graduating from high school, I didn't have any experience or expertise in anything at all, so I got a job at a local supermarket and had been working part-time there. When I started working for the supermarket, I was originally a cashier, where I was in charge of the cash register and customer service. But because I'm a naturally clumsy person, I got a lot of complaints from customers. This led to me being moved to a different department after 6 months, and I started to work behind the scenes, working in product delivery. But even there, I made a lot of mistakes. Such was me, a clumsy person who couldn't get through a day of work without getting scolded by her superiors. That's when my parents started talking to me about a potential arranged marriage. Aaron is 3 years older than me, and originally, he was a salesman, and my parents were his clients. My parents were very much impressed with Aaron and how well he did his job, and told him they wanted him to marry their daughter, with high hopes he would. But whenever he was alone with me, he became quite an overbearing person.
"Miss Layla, if you call yourself a woman, I suggest you at least offer me a cup of tea,
Oh, I'm sorry if I'm a little senseless.
And I'd also like you to answer with a yes, sir, and nothing more, please."
Yes, sir. I was honestly afraid of this man. I seriously considered refusing to go through with the arranged marriage, but because of the thought that I would disappoint my parents, I couldn't say no, and decided to accept the proposal. My parents were very happy, and I took the opportunity to get married, and to quit my job, and I became a housewife.
"I don't really care where we live as long as the rent is free."
And although he didn't have a good look on his face, he quickly agreed to live in this apartment. Because we didn't have to pay rent, he started collecting antiques as a hobby recommended to him by a friend of his. I wanted him to stop collecting them because they cost a lot of money, in addition to the fact neither he nor I understood the true value of these antiques. But I couldn't suggest anything to my husband, let alone argue with him, and I could only watch in silence. But then Clayton, my darling son, was born, and I think we had a happy life at least, if it wasn't more smooth sailing. It was an ordinarily happy life. Clayton has always been such a kind sweetheart, and he worked very hard on his studies at school. I was often pretty busy taking care of Aaron, and Clayton always did what he could to help me. Even during instances his father was hard on him, he would retort,
"If you don't like what Mum does, why don't you do it yourself, huh?"
He always defended me. My son went off to college this spring, and he's currently living on his own. Today's the first time in a long time that he came home.
"Hi, Mum, I'm home."
Oh, Clayton, darling, welcome back. How's college? Did you make any friends yet?
"I've already made friends. You worry too much, Mum. I'm fine, and I always will be."
He sat himself down on the sofa in the living room.
"I actually came home today to talk to you about something."
He went on to tell me about a housekeeping service that an acquaintance of his had launched not too long ago, and one of his purposes for coming home that day was to recommend it to me.
"When I started living alone, I realised something. Your house is perfect. And then I thought to myself, this could work as a job."
I was praised for the housework I took for granted, and I was frankly very surprised. Oh dear, I only ever did everything that anyone else can do, but doing it for a job? I couldn't possibly do something like that.
"That's not true, Mum. The house has always been in such great shape because of all the things you do for it. And with those skills of yours, I know it'll be a great job for you."
I'd never been praised for anything I'd ever done before, and I never even thought that housework could even become a job with income and financial independence. And yet my own son told me about it and suggested I shoot for it. To be completely honest with you, I was very intrigued. I wanted to try a job in housekeeping services. In the evening, I asked my husband about it, but, as one could expect by now, he was adamantly against the idea.
"A useless bum like you can't possibly work a job properly."
But I was about to say something else when he cut me off.
"I'm going on a business trip starting tomorrow. Get my stuff ready, all right?"
He pretty much called to me as he went to the bathroom, as though I wasn't his wife but his own personal slave, like the same person I was for 35 long years. "Yes, sir." And then, as usual, I packed his luggage. As I fold some of his shirts and other items of clothing and place them into his travel bag, I start to wonder about something. Aaron had been going on the road a lot lately. I wondered where such a busy salesman would go. I really didn't know. And I'm sure if I asked my husband, he'd make fun of me again and say something like, "You really don't know anything about anything, do you?" Yep, it's better not to ask him, and as I came to this decision, I finished packing his bags. The next morning, my husband left early in the morning for his business trip. I was cleaning the living room, vacuuming as I always do, when I noticed a cell phone on the table. My husband had left it there. I panicked, and I called my husband's office. His boss, Mr. Nesmith, picked up the phone himself, and I told him that Aaron had forgotten his phone.
"Your husband has a cell phone for business purposes, so I'll personally give him a call on that number, Mrs. Zagatsky."
"I'm so sorry my husband has caused you some inconvenience." I was about to hang up when Mr. Nesmith added,
May I have a moment, Mrs. Zagatsky? I have something to tell you."
His voice got ever quieter as he said so, and then he said,
Please excuse me, it's nothing important. Thank you for letting me know about Aaron's phone."
He hung up. Later on, the house phone rang, and it was my husband.
"Bring my cell phone down to the entrance of the apartment building,"
is all he says before he hangs up the phone. I grab his phone, climb down a few flights of stairs, and spot him outside, waiting beside a car I'd never seen before. He took the phone from my hand, nodded his head in what could have been a gesture of gratitude, and got into the car. In the passenger seat was a woman, perhaps a couple of years younger than me. She looked at me and said, "Good afternoon." She greeted me cheerfully. In the moment, the only thing I could do was only bow my head. Aaron didn't even give me a second look before starting the car and driving away. The time I had all to myself while he was away on a business trip was always precious to me, but on this occasion, it was especially important. You witnessed what happened the other day when my son recommended a housekeeping service that was looking for new recruits, and I was very curious about it indeed. Still pretty unfamiliar with how to use a cell phone, I decided to do some research about these kinds of services. Here's what I found out: that my usual chores could really become a job with a reasonable income. Clayton was right about me. This job really suited me. My desire to work as a housekeeper really roared ablaze that moment. And my determination allowed me to swallow my complaints and decided to ask my husband about it again. The night my husband came home from his business trip, I told him this: I really want to work as a housekeeper. I can only work when you're not here, and I promise I'll still do the housework for this house, as I always have. I will never give you any trouble. Just please, let me do this. I say this and bowed my head until my forehead nearly touched the floor, and then...
Do what you want.
He actually granted me my wish. Half a month later, I got my first commission. Extremely nervous, but at the same time ridiculously excited, I went to work as a housekeeper. My first client was an elderly woman, and she told me that she lived with her daughter. Her daughter was always busy with her job, and on top of that, she's not very good with housework. The elderly woman, whose name was Mrs. Cloverfield, had been doing the housework for a long time, until very recently, when her legs and back got worse. Her situation made it very hard for her to do the housework like she used to. I tried not to be rude to my first ever client by making myself appear presentable before I rang the doorbell. Good morning, I'm from the housekeeping service. I called through the door. A small elderly woman opened the door and let me in. As she told me, her legs seemed to lack the strength they once had, emphasized by that limp she had, and her posture suggested she had a problem with her back as well. She sat herself down on a chair and politely told me which room she wanted me to clean. Following her instructions, I said, "Well then, I'll start with this room," and opened a door leading to a room adjacent to the living room. It seemed to be a woman's room, and I could only assume it belonged to Mrs. Cloverfield's daughter. There was a lot of stuff scattered around. Come to think of it, she did say her daughter wasn't good at tidying up. I was thinking about that as I started collecting the things scattered on the floor. I eventually came across a few photographs. I casually picked up the pieces of photography paper, one by one, and put them together in a pile. I suddenly had a thought: where in the world had I seen this woman before? My gut told me that this wasn't the first time I'd seen the woman in those photographs. I eventually noticed there was a man in some of the photos, and one in particular caught my attention. I couldn't believe my eyes. The reason? Because the man in these photographs was none other than Aaron Zgotsky, my own husband. I had to look at the dates on the photos. Lo and behold, they coincided with the days that my husband was away on a business trip. I then came to another devastating revelation. When he came to pick up his forgotten phone, there was indeed a woman in the passenger seat of his car. She'd given me a nice smile and a polite greeting. That woman and this woman in the photographs were one and the same, without question. My mind flew into turmoil, but my instinct screamed at me that I was a housekeeper at that moment, and that it was the worst time and place to panic right then and there. I thought to myself, I'm going to do a good job first, then I'm going to worry about what I just saw, and that's exactly what I did. I cleaned up that room, and the next, and the next, until Mrs. Cloverfield was satisfied, as if nothing had happened. When I had finished all the chores Mrs. Cloverfield had wanted me to do, I was just about to walk out the front door when I decided to ask the woman about the photos. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Cloverfield. I was cleaning up your daughter's room, and I couldn't help but notice a few photographs scattered around the floor. The man in the photo with your daughter looked a lot like someone I know. May I inquire as to what their relationship to each other is?" "That gentleman is my daughter's boyfriend, Mrs. Gotsky. They started seeing each other about a year ago now, I believe." She went on to tell me everything she knew about their relationship. My husband and Mrs. Cloverfield's daughter knew each other when he was her salesman and she was his client. He was the one who asked her out. What surprised me the most was Mrs. Cloverfield's daughter, as well as Mrs. Cloverfield herself, knew full well that this man was already married to another woman. She is one of those wives who can only do housework, nothing else, but he apparently takes a liking to women who are independent and who work, just like he does, like my daughter, Joyce. I see. He says he wants to divorce her, but she won't give him her approval, it seems. It's been a bit of a problem for the two lovebirds, honestly. That's terrible. I'm so sorry. Well, I'm afraid I must be off, Mrs. Cloverfield. Thank you for the opportunity. I bowed my head and left her house. I can't forgive him. I won't forgive him. I can't believe that this is what he thought about me. I was so angry that the desire to divorce him made me see red, and if I recall correctly, I went straight to City Hall, accepted some green documents, which I believe were divorce files, and went home. A short time afterwards, my husband came home.
Dinner.
If you want to eat dinner, you can make it yourself.
Then bath.
He looked at me suspiciously and tried to ask what the hell was wrong with me. I stood up silently and held out the green documents I'd received at City Hall earlier that day.
That's a divorce decree, ain't it?
An evil, ominous grin starts to spread across his pathetic face. You've been cheating on me.
Yeah, and what business do you have with that? You have no right to meddle in my personal affairs.
How can you imply it's none of my business? I felt as if I'd been denied everything I'd ever been to this bastard. I devoted my existence to him, completely oblivious to the reality he was willing to throw me to the rats any day. I found myself crying, but Aaron's grin only got ever bigger.
I gave you a chance to be happy as anyone else. But since you insist, I'll gladly divorce you. It's just like you want, apparently.
He starts to sign the divorce papers.
You're freaking nothing without me. What do you think you're going to do if you divorce me? You really believe you can live on your own?
I'm not the same person I used to be. I've started working as a housekeeper after all. Upon hearing that, Aaron starts to laugh hysterically.
Then I guess getting divorced will get you nowhere then. There you go. I signed the divorce papers for you. Happy now?
He proceeded to throw the divorce papers in my face. Apparently, he's only thinking I'm just using the divorce as a threat. He doesn't have a clue I'm seriously trying to get a divorce. I still had my doubts, but I don't think I could live with him, being this stupid and this cruel to me. I decided I would take action the next morning. No more housework for my husband whatsoever. I got myself ready and headed for City Hall. Oh yeah, I have to tell Clayton about this before I go file for divorce. I told myself to call my son, and I did.
What's wrong, Mum? You never call me on the phone. What a nice surprise.
Yes, it is, but I have some great news. I'm divorcing your father. He was probably startled by the suddenness of this news, because I noticed that for a moment, he was at a loss for words, but he immediately said to me, in that deep, soothing tone of his,
If that's what you want, Mum, I'm not against it. I'll always be on your side.
I told you he's such an angel. I gave my thanks before I hung up the phone. I then went to City Hall and submitted the divorce papers, and then I decided to go home. I've already filed the divorce papers. Now all that's left to do is pack up my stuff and get the hell out of that hellhole. That's what I thought as I went inside. I immediately knew what was wrong. The living room was in complete disarray. My husband must have been drinking heavily because there was a huge pile of crushed empty cans of beer. The sheer size of the pile made me gag. More cans of cocktails and half-empty bags of potato chips and beef jerky had transformed the little table into a garage sale of sorts. There was no sign of Aaron. I was a little curious as to what had happened, and to what was happening right now, assuming he was still in the apartment. Next mission, should I choose to accept it, search the apartment and find the treasonous Aaron Skotsky. Easiest mission and possible task in my goddamn life. I immediately heard something that sounded like a moan coming from the end of the hallway that led to the bedroom. The voice belonged to Aaron. I rushed to see if I could find him, and in the corner of the hallway, in front of the door to the bathroom, cowering in agony, was Aaron Skotsky. We have a hallway in our apartment, which ended in front of 2 steps that led to an elevated closet, a storage room of sorts. My husband, judging by the mountain of beer cans in the living room, had become a hopeless drunk on an empty stomach, and seemed to have fallen down on these steps. As to why he wanted to go to the storage room, I don't believe I'll ever know. Dumbass, right? No. Even worse. Brain dead.
Hey, you don't just stand there. Call an ambulance.
Yes, sir, was my usual habitual response, and in that moment, I didn't even think to refrain from saying that. I couldn't just leave him like that, a hopeless, stupid mess like that. So despite my exasperation, I decided to call an ambulance. Soon the ambulance arrived at our house. Aaron was being carried out on a stretcher. His face was turning pale, and he was grunting and groaning like a sad pooch. The paramedic turned to me and told me,
Madame, if it's no problem to you, please accompany your husband to the hospital.
I'm sorry. It is a problem to me, sir, because I'm a stranger to this man. The paramedic looked surprised at first, but then he seemed to sense something was wrong between right away, and the medics proceeded to take him in unaccompanied. Because my ex-husband was rushed in an emergency without any of his important belongings, as a last act of mercy, I went to the hospital to deliver his cell phone and wallet, and that's when I heard that he had a broken leg and needed to stay in the hospital for a month. I decided to conjure up a plan to exact revenge on my ex-husband during his unscheduled hospitalization. When I got home, I packed all of my personal things, and at the same time, I began to gather evidence of my ex-husband's affair. I also decided to confiscate all of his belongings. For starters, his prized antiques. They were thrown into a cardboard box to be sent to the garbage plant as oversized trash. Every time I tossed one into the box, I heard the sound of them cracking. The sound was so pleasant. It felt like all of these negative emotions were finally exploding out of my heart, and before I knew it, I'd fetched a hammer, and with the largest grin on my face and warm tears running down my cheeks, I let loose all of my long-standing resentment. I mercilessly smashed every single antique into 1,000 pieces and confiscated them all. By the time a month had passed, I'd moved out of the apartment and had started renting a new apartment where I now live alone. It's the first time in my life I've lived alone, but compared to before, Clayton visits me a lot more. Since he started living alone, he seems to have gotten addicted to cooking, and he often stopped by to give me some of his cooking. Just today, I went to work in the morning. I was having a most productive day, and it was during my lunch break that I checked my cell phone and found my incoming call history. My ex-husband's name was all over it. Oh, that's right. He got out of the hospital today. And just as I'm thinking that, I get another call from Aaron Skotsky. Hello?
Frick you and that sing-song hello of yours. Why the frick is someone I don't know living in my apartment? You did this, didn't you?
Yeah, about that apartment. I sold it last month. Aaron was ballistic. He started to yell into his phone at the top of his lungs.
You think you're going to get away with all the bullshit you did while I wasn't there to stop you?
My parents bought that apartment for me, and they did so as they confirmed it was in my name. I had the sole rights to it.
What's yours is mine, bitch.
He seemed to forget that he'd signed the divorce papers. Listen, bucko, we're already divorced. Finally, Aaron comes to his senses.
I'm not going to let you get away with this. I'm going to sue you. How about that?
I was surprised he hadn't broken his phone yet, with how angry he was. But, lest we forget, I was not the woman I used to be. If you want to sue me, go right ahead, good sir. I'm also going to sue you and your cheating girlfriend. I suggest to get prepared for what's about to come. I said that and hung up the phone. After that, through my lawyer, I demanded a fitting room of alimony from my ex-husband and the woman whom he cheated on me with. The evidence of the affair was well prepared, and with all of it presented before them, they couldn't come up with a valid excuse. They couldn't get away with it, lost the war, and I was able to receive a large sum of money from both of them in one payment. Later on, I learned that Aaron had borrowed half a year's salary from his job to pay me a lump sum of alimony. He, who had a good record, also did whatever he wanted at the company, and the reality that he was having an affair had become quite a notorious story for quite some time. He often used to say,
"So what if she finds out I'm having an affair? It'll be no problem. She won't pose any threat at all. She's too much of a pussycat to go through with any divorce."
Needless to say, he was insanely cocky. The reality was that as soon as his wife found out about the affair, she divorced him, and now he has to borrow a huge chunk of money to pay her the alimony she demanded him. It's only obvious that that would become the hot topic of in-house gossip, and even though he must have been so ashamed of it, he couldn't quite quit the company. He has to work every day for the money he owes his company. Such an ex-husband, with no house to live in and no money to pay for even a cheap place, went to his girlfriend for help. I heard that now, the two of them, along with Mrs. Cloverfield, live in a room that looks like a garbage dump, considering the fact that none of them can do housework properly, to each their own reason. I couldn't help but feel bad for Mrs. Cloverfield, but she knew Aaron was married, and never seemed to have even tried to persuade her daughter to do the right thing. As for me, for the past 6 months, I've been working hard at the housekeeping service, and as a result of my hard work, my wish came true. I was hired as a full-time employee. I was just promoted to technical instructor last week, and I'm going my best to go on housekeeping as I teach newcomers some effective techniques of my own. I may not be able to do much, but many people seem to have come to respect me, and I'm so happy I'm making a small difference, at least for the company. I will continue to do my best to cherish each and every day of my life so that I can help as many people as possible.